Hello from the One True Scale. This video is about how to construct the 1/144 scale hanging diorama of two C-47s dropping parachutes that I showed in a previous video. The minimum dimensions of a single plane with 4 parachutes in inches are length 24, width 8, height 12. To display two planes with some stagger as I did, it is length 32, width 24, height 12. All dimensions I give would be double for 1/72 scale. My diorama was hanging and carefully balanced like a mobile, in a large space viewable from all sides. An alternative with a single aircraft could be done as a wall or box diorama, with aircraft and parachutes mounted on stiff wires instead of hanging. 4 parachutes are ideal to show the chute opening sequence, but I think more or less could be used. For modelers who are about to embark on this great project, your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is the details, and they will fight you savagely. Your parachutes will have to wrestle with giant cutting wheels and then be forged in boiling water. Your harnesses won't fit, your glue won't stick, and your shroud lines won't hold. But I have full confidence in your creativity, devotion to detail, and skill in modeling. We will accept nothing less than full accuracy. Good luck on this noble undertaking. I'm showing the materials and tools I used to do this in 1/144 scale. My rushed first try was okay, but not perfect, so use your creativity to do better or adapt it to other scales. For parachute canopies, I used ping pong balls cut in half with a thin grinding wheel on a rotary tool, then shaped under boiling water with pliers, sticks, and tweezers. I used fishing line and craft bead line for the parachute shroud lines and hanging lines. Shroud lines were glued to the canopy with CA glue and to the paratrooper with flexible craft glue. The aircraft and parachute hooks were green florist wire. My 1/144 scale C-47s were pre-painted Japanese snap-together models, made in the 9-pack Big Bird 4 series by Algernon Product in 2009. They are excellent models, but probably very hard to find. Good unpainted Rodin and Minicraft kits are still available. I drilled and filed the small cargo door open and glued in a paratrooper about to jump. The suspension method for the aircraft and for the parachute string must be provided for before the aircraft is permanently assembled. Lots of alternatives are possible, like fishing lines or cantilevering the aircraft's wing. For my diorama exhibit, I hung the C-47s at a scale 700 feet drop height above the town, which is 58 inches. I needed their heading not to change, so I used 24-gauge green florist wire to constrain yaw instead of fishing line. Hooks at each end of the 18-inch wires also constrained yaw and allowed easy disassembly and storage. Instead of putting screw eyes in the ceiling, I attached a 17-inch threaded rod to a light fixture with binder clips. The 0.5 millimeter 20/1000 of an inch drilled hole in the fuselage and bent hook looks simple, but was actually very fussy and had to be precisely done. It needed to constrain aircraft pitch and yaw, both with and without a parachute string. The curved end had to be easily wormed through the tiny hole, where it nested perfectly around an assembly pin and socket. Hopefully you can improvise something similar for whichever C-47 model you find. Please see my other parachute video for more photos and details on the parachute opening and spacing. I had decided to give each plane 5 jumpers at 1-second intervals. with 24 feet per second or 2-inch vertical spacing. Horizontal spacing also starts at 2 inches, but increases due to the decelerations described in the video. I used my Japanese DC-3 to work out hanging details of the parachute strings. This string with jumper 2 diving went to my starboard C-47. My close-up construction details show the starboard string. This string with jumper 2 waving went to my port C-47. The port string is shown in my hanging detail photos. In both strings, jumper 1 is on the static line hook and jumper 5 is attached to the wall. Before we start making the parachutes, I want to show you my best hanging photos for detail and effect. The parachute string was carefully tensioned and positioned to get the hanging curve shape right. Canopy holes at an angle for jumpers 2 and 3 forced the inclined orientation. Holes were more horizontal for jumpers 4 and 5, allowing a more vertical orientation. These less impressive photos may also be useful for details. Tiny craft beads glued to the string set the downward position for each canopy. All parachutes had to be free to rotate and balance jumper heavy to keep their orientation regardless of string twisting. It is not as easy to find Dimension 3 view drawings for parachutes as it is for aircraft. U.S. Army T-5 parachutes used on D-Day had a 28-foot diameter. From technical sources, I'm pretty sure that is the flat diameter, and that you have to multiply by 0.7 to get the projected diameter shown, giving 19.6 feet, or 1.63 inches in 1/144th scale. This makes a 40 millimeter or 1.57 inch ping pong ball an attractive candidate. However, half a ping pong ball is not the proper half ellipsoid shape, and it is not scalloped. An internet search for scale model parachutes brings up a lot of irrelevant stuff. But on Shapeways, I did find a designer that has plastic 3D printed parachute canopies in scales from 1/87th to 1/500th. They are scalloped and ellipsoidal. I didn't have time to order these and try them out, and I don't know how easily they could be deformed into opening canopy shapes. To make parachute canopies out of ping pong balls, we first have to cut them in half somehow. Freehand sawing didn't seem precise enough. My biggest miter box could barely fit the ping pong ball. I didn't have a scroll saw, jigsaw, bandsaw, or table saw, or a guided hot wire cutter. A 1mm 40/1000 of an inch grinding wheel on my rotary tool could cut if I could keep it stable enough. I mounted my rotary tool and its clear plastic router attachment and made a fixture out of a cold medicine cup to hold the ping pong ball. Some fear of slicing fingers, but it worked okay. The ball rattles too much in the cup, so punch or drill a 7mm 1/4 inch hole to remove the bottom bump. Set bottom of grinding wheel 20mm from router surface. Your router can mount to a table. I chose to just hold mine flat side down. First, we'll cut the cup fixture. Put on safety glasses and set rotary tool to lowest speed. Turn over to flat side. Hold steady with left hand. Hold the cup firmly flat with your right hand. The wheel is rotating counterclockwise. If you misalign the cup, the wheel can grab it and send it counterclockwise. Hold your fingers firm and don't let them get grabbed with the cup. If it's hard to rotate while cutting, just cut in steps by backing off, rotating, and cutting more. Near the end of the cut, don't press on the top part or it will grab. Fixture is cut, turn tool off. Add double-sided tape to inside a fixture as shown, 5 places. Using backlighting, find the thicker seam of the ping pong ball. Place ping pong ball in fixture, aligning seam parallel to top. Place on a flat surface and press ball down. Tape will hold ball too tightly at first, but will diminish with sawdust accumulation. Reset bottom of grinding wheel to about 22 millimeters. You want to cut the ball in equal height halves, but this might take some adjustment. The cutting process for ping pong balls is the same as for the fixture. It's best to go very slow because the plastic can melt. You can cut while rotating or cut, back off, rotate, cut. Your finger on top of the ball makes spinning more stable, but remove it before the end of the cut to prevent grabbing. Don't worry about unevenness or melted plastic. Just carefully remove it with fine sandpaper against a flat surface. Round the thick-looking edge with a fine sanding stick. Punch or drill a 3 mm 1/8 inch vent hole. Remove the printing with wet 600 grit sandpaper or some solvent you trust. We are almost ready to shape the parachute canopies in boiling water, but not all of them require a half ping pong ball. Starboard string shown with jumpers 1 through 4 on the diagonal and 5 at the bottom. Jumper 2 used a crude triangle of scrap rolled tight. Jumper 3's tight canopy was crushed as a sphere, then cut in half with a miter saw. Jumpers 4, 5, and any more you want should use the cut in half method. For this brand of ping pong ball, deformations would spring back if the water wasn't truly boiling. Water about 3 inches deep covers the canopy for a couple of minutes. Use a low boil to see what you're doing and avoid scalding your hands. The shaping is hard to describe and takes some trial and error. Usually you're holding the canopy with one tool and mashing, crushing, bending, or twisting with another. You can reboil multiple times until you get the look you want. Remove tool marks with wet 600 grit sandpaper. If you survived making parachute canopies and still have some fight in you, your next battle is gluing on shroud lines in paratrooper. This is the part of my project that I was the least happy with, so I'll give you some untested ideas that might avoid my problems. I researched good photos and paintings of T5 parachutes that I can't duplicate here. I was ready to add 24 fine shroud lines, 4 riser straps, some harness details, and some paratrooper equipment, but I found it nearly impossible to place and glue and bend. Thin, springy, and pre-curved fishing line in 1/144 scale. I couldn't even see what I was doing adequately. Quickly settled for just 4 shroud lines, glued to the paratrooper from shoulder to waist, in approximate positions of the 4 risers. Unlucky Jumper 13 succeeded with this harness and riser effect better than any of the other 8. I cut my fishing lines at 55 millimeters, but 65 millimeters, 2.2 inches, is probably more accurate. This sketch, which looks like a T5, shows shroud lines 1.25 times the smaller projected diameter. 1.25 times 40 gives 50 for the shroud line, plus 5 to CA glued to the inside of the canopy, plus 5 for risers, and 5 to craft glue to the torso gives 65. 1/144 scale airborne troops I saw online were all in fighting pose, not hanging from a parachute. The best substitutes were these Tommy Tech Japan Self-Defense Force figures. 8 out of the 12 poses looked pretty reasonable for jumping or hanging paratroopers. My CA glue liked the ping pong balls, but not so much the fishing line. Each line needed to be held still for a minute or two to set. For the paratrooper, I coated both his torso and the line ends in flexible craft glue and attached when tacky enough to hold. Jumper 13 used the unmarked or the Berkeley 1-pound fishing line. It was limp enough to hang straight from just the paratrooper's weight, but too limp to support any of the 3 inclined jumpers per string. I panicked and used thicker Stanislaus bead thread for all the other jumpers. It would have been better to use Berkeley 2-pound with 1 or 2 lines of Stanislaus if needed. Unmarked, Berkeley 1-pound, Berkeley 2-pound Stanislaus shown in millimeters. You can see some of the success and failures I described in these photos. The thick Stanislaus line used everywhere here had too much curve from the spool. It refused to take a straight line to the paratrooper, and glued to the paratrooper's torso twisted at odd angles. For only 4 shroud lines, bending strong, thin metal music wire might have been a better solution. If you finished your parachutes and didn't surrender, it's an easy march from now on. We just have to make the hook and line to suspend the parachutes. A well-hidden hook could have been worked into the upper door corner. I had to choose function over appearance because I had to reach 3 feet off of a ladder to hang it. I lifted the hook and string holding jumper 1, hooked the aircraft wire, then lowered the loop over the antenna. Parachute string tension made the hook fit snug to the fuselage. If tension is too downward, the hook will tip and not conform to the fuselage. It will also rest on Jumper Zero's shoulders and might pry him from the doorway. I used the thick Stanislaus bead line for the parachute string, but Berkeley 2-pound would have been strong enough and less visible. Hopefully, whatever knot you use will be less visible than my double square knot with craft glue. I used 26-gauge Florist wire, mostly hand-bent with some help from needle nose pliers. Static line portion holding jumper 1 should be 15 scale feet or less, 1 1/4 inches, 31 millimeters. Twist the wire tight around jumper 1's waist and add craft glue. Here are front, side, and bottom views. Just make subtle tweaks until you get the function and appearance right. I needed 24 inches of parachute string line plus 6 extra, so 30 total. I assembled the 4 parachutes on the line with 1 craft bead below each chute. All but jumper 2 used the vent hole as one of the string holes. You now have to set the chute spacing and height to a grid. As discussed earlier and in my other parachute video, use small pieces of painter's tape to hold the craft bead positions, which you will mark and CA glue when finalized. Set up your exact hanging situation with removable painter's tape and clamps. My hanging suspension was a careful balance of objects sort of on a catenary curve, including the aircraft and hook. Too little tension would tip the hook, too much tension would pitch the aircraft up. Once correct, I marked the angle of the aircraft wire to keep tension constant. Then I experimented with how far to put the string attachment below the hook attachment, starting at 10 inches where the string was too vertical. 9, better. 8, pretty good. 7, kind of horizontal. 6, too horizontal. I chose 8, which agreed closest with my grid studies. The chute holes should have been more angled for jumpers 2 and 3, and less so for jumper 4, but I was pretty happy with both strings. Well, congratulations, soldiers, you did it. You kicked Jerry's butt. It's time to see Paris, drink wine, and kiss some French girls. Au revoir from the one true scale, mes amis.